Hello and welcome to the program. I am Suren. Question. Are you happy? That may be a very silly question for some, although it's not so for me. Why, you might ask? Well, when I was younger and many years ago, I happened to love everything as I do now and everybody around me. I loved all the things I did, studying and working, but for some reason, people around me, even my friends and my own family, did not seem to understand what it was all about. That I loved everything and everybody. It was then when I asked myself, that is when I was younger, what I was doing wrong, why it was so that people assumed about me being so extremely silly. Much later, to my surprise, I have learned that my attitude was not wrong. People preferred to assume and label others for what they were not. No matter what they have been told, they preferred to emphasize their assumptions more than realities. No matter what they have been told, they preferred to emphasize their assumptions more than realities they felt like or not realizing that surrounded them. This is not said in opposition to anybody, but as an observation. Majority of these people were not happy, and they could not accept the truth, the reality of things as they were. That was it. They considered life being nothing but a huge boredom. They were bored. As we say, bored to death. But did life need to be so boring? Why people were so sad, not happy, and assuming others to be like themselves. Then I made it into a study for myself and discovered that many people did not know how to be happy. And their pastime consisted of observing others as they did with themselves, but reflecting their own selves in a most unguided and uncontrolled and negative ways. I thought that perhaps this is why people conducted their wars, enmities, hatred against one another. They were the people who walked through the rose garden with their eyes closed. However, when turning inwards, one would still discover that people generally were not bad. The people I have encountered were those who had very harsh lifestyles through the history, namely wars, hardships, poverty, hunger, thirst, boredom, you name it. They were closely involved in doing things not for love's sake, but as a necessity to protect themselves against the other side, against the outer world. Because they did not know what happiness was. They did not know what love truly was. Religions were there teaching them how to be happy. But their religions and almost all other belief systems they adhered to were only considered important elements in their lives on weekends. Work commitments, which they considered as boredom, and monotony was controlling them. But there were also people I have observed during my younger days that they were generally happier, easygoing and relaxed. They were presenting broad smiles on their faces and happiness in their hearts. They probably endured hardships but lived long lives, whereas people of boredom did not make it to ripe old age, looking crippled and old at the middle of their lifespan. This made me conclude that probably some happiness principle should be applied in human lives. Would that help the human civilization to live longer, having better and fulfilling lives, and be happy? Then I concluded to make this into a study. After many years of that, the results were as follows. Now I would like to talk to you about what I discovered during this time regarding how to develop the habit of happiness. But the question, are you happy, is very interesting. It certainly is not a silly question, because without being happy, your life would be virtually meaningless. Not one single success is truly a success unless it brings with it some happiness. Not one single part of your everyday life has true value unless happiness comes with it. Many centuries ago, a Greek philosopher, as I read elsewhere, Epictetus, plainly said, God has made all men to enjoy happiness and constancy of good. However, how can one enjoy happiness? Happiness seems just a momentary phenomenon. A small happiness, or maybe temporary happiness, and complete happiness at all times? Question mark. If you say that such a thing is impossible, and it is only rationalization, but is it correct to assume this? Happiness is possible, and you need to be happy at all times. Charles Darwin, the naturalist theorist of evolution, and we have spoken about it, was also a great philosopher. He wrote all about his extreme struggles for existence, but arrived at the same conclusions as Epictetus. He writes, all sentient things have been formed so as to enjoy, as a general rule, happiness. And he went on further to say, happiness decidedly prevails. We all have the right to be happy. But I will repeat the question, with which we started this program. Are you happy? We discover that all too few people are happy. Many people do not know what happiness is, as they have never experienced it. Same as those who have never known what love truly is. Somebody was always to be blamed for some people who have never known what happiness is. I am, for one, so very interested in philosophies and studied the teachers of those philosophies. I studied the philosophers themselves, and I have also looked into people of religious background and their philosophies, and what I have discovered, like many others did before me, that man himself is responsible for his happiness, as also emphasized by M. Germain. As you may know, even Abraham Lincoln, who summed it up so well when he said that people are as happy as they make up their minds to be. We need only to look around us to see how people try to hide their feelings to cover up their unhappiness. People are too often unhappy, worried, depressed, and whatever else. It is not as it should be. So, wherein lies the trouble then? Epictetus stated again, if any be unhappy, let him remember that he is unhappy by reason of himself alone. This is the truth. And here comes yet another understanding. Far more important. Truth. If one creates his or own unhappiness, then he can create his own happiness. But how can you create your own happiness? That's a good question too. Then you may indeed need to learn a great lesson and use it. That is, you must learn the happiness habit. This means that you must say to yourself often, I make it a habit to be happy. It may be a simple statement, but therein lies in this profound truth. The book of Proverbs, chapter 15, verse 15 says, that he is of a merry heart hath a continuous feast. By cultivating this habit, your life can be made more enjoyable and more worthwhile. Habits can be very easy to cultivate. And any habit, like smoking, gambling, or drinking alcohol, are in the same category. In fact, if we cultivated negative habits, then we would not be happy. But happiness is and can only be a positive habit. It is the habit that will bring you a happy life. By understanding this simple truth, and by learning all about it, and in fact utilizing the happiness habit, we all can change our entire outlook on life. This way, no longer will we face ourselves in the mirror and say, I want to be happy. But things that happen to me will not let me be miserable. or happy. What indeed happens to us does not have the power to create either happiness or unhappiness. What creates the negative or positive happiness feeling within us is how we react to circumstances. The happiness habit can only teach us the basic philosophy of reacting to circumstances. We may not be able to do much about things that happen to us, but we can do very much about how we take them. One cannot demand happiness. That's a fact. And there are people who do. That is almost surely courting disaster. It is one of the many paradoxes of psychology that the pursuit of happiness defeats its own purpose, said a British psychotherapist, J.A. Hatfield. Continuing, he said, "We find happiness only when we do not directly seek it." We can say that the secret is not in seeking, but often in expecting. Developing the happiness habit and using it unconsciously, obtaining the glory of happiness from it, these things will make happiness an everyday occurrence for you and for me, for all of us. You may expect it as you expect to eat and sleep daily. One of the first things that the use of the happiness habit will bring in the destruction of an enemy of nature. Guess what it is? Monotony. Nature dislikes monotony as it dislikes vacuum. Monotony can destroy your youth and bring on an old age prematurely. A really happy person does not find life monotonous. And a life that is filled with happiness is the one in which the mental faculties are not allowed to rust. Many people who have lived beyond the century mark have admitted that they were able to do so because of one simple fact. They kept their minds young by keeping themselves occupied with new interests. Question: are you keeping yourself busy with something very creative? Singing, painting, writing, walking? For these centenarians, life was merely not monotonous, rarely monotonous if. For them, life proved happy. The concepts are like the two sides of a coin. Happiness banishes monotony. Monotony hinders happiness. Could this be then the secret of longevity? Is the life filled with happiness, filled with new interests, filled with mental activity that is going to be the longest and healthiest? Question. The answer we will come up with is a big yes, of course. Some people complain of others with whom some of us have come into contact. There are many people amongst them saying that if happiness depends on such things as new interests and mental activity, it must be really difficult. However, as it was said, before this thought can be considered as nonsense. Remember that anyone can achieve happiness with little more than his or her own constructive reflections. This is the very basic of therapeutic value of mystical religion, if it makes sense. Anyone attaining self-mastery through subjective therapy, prayers, meditations, affirmations, whichever you may like, will never find life monotonous. Is your life monotonous? The important factor here is achieving victory in the battle against monotony, and it is knowing what we can call monotony limit. It is virtually not possible for your entire life, every waking hour, to be constantly in a progressive phase. There are all manner of minor monotonies in life, and we cannot avoid them. There are the monotonous times brought on by necessary repetitions of daily tasks, work, repeated occurrences of required duties, depending on what you may be doing. These kind of small monotonies, if permitted to accumulate without any interceding break of constructive activity and thought, can grow to a point where they will overweigh the happy moments of life. Monotony tends to become top-heavy when it grows. It is like a forest which develops on a small base and widens at the top. The first monotony limit is that point at which your monotony accumulation starts to become top-heavy. The second monotony limit is the point which your psychological structure will topple due to this top-heaviness. Monotony, frustration, and tension are the basis of much unhappiness and mental ill health, says a Dr. Lawrence Kolb of the U.S. Public Health Service of some time ago. A large number of people turn in upon themselves and suffer from such conditions because they do not know how to make proper use of the native impulses and energies that they have. Rousing latent faculties for the appreciation of art and promoting a wider indulgence in hobbies or even a devotional ideal in religion could help these frustrated, tense people by giving them ease through activities that relieve tension and dispel monotony. One needs to recognize one's own monotony limit. Perhaps you can make a small chart or a card that you can carry in your pocket. You can design it in your mobile to determine at what point your general welfare begins to break down due to undue monotony. We can call this an unhappiness chart, if you like. The card used as a chart with divisions from left to right representing the days of the week, from Sunday through to Saturday, and with divisions from top to bottom, standing for each hour of your waking and working day. As M. Germain also suggested, for the first week, evaluate every hour as it ends. Decide whether the monotonous things you were forced to do during the hour outweighed those activities and thoughts that were not monotonous. If your decision is that monotony filled more than 20 minutes of that hour, blacken the square with your pencil or fingers. If the hour was less than 1/3 filled the monotony, leave it empty. At the end of the first week, you will have a chart that resembles a checkered pattern of uncertain design, although it is possible that you may at times find a very definite pattern on your card or mobile. If this is the case, it means your days follow a set formula and should be changed. Now, total the number of filled in squares and total the number of white squares as well. If the white squares are not twice as many as the black, you have exceeded the first monotony limit. If the white squares are fewer than black, you have exceeded the second monotony limit. For example, let's say that you spend 16 hours a day in the 7-day week. That will give you a total of 120 squares. If more than 56 are black, you are well beyond the limit. If more than 37 are black, you have passed into the danger zone. Keep up this unhappiness chart until your hours of excessive monotony are less than 25% of your waking and working day. Work to cut the percentage daily so that you can eventually build up your periods of happiness to 90% or more of each and every week. After the first week or two, you should be able to give up marking your chart hourly. You will find that at bedtime, you will be able to recall your day quite accurately to fill in the chart. But keep on recording your unhappiness until you find you have achieved a true level of living. That is the maximum amount of happiness constantly. Aim for 90% or greater as your level of living and accept nothing less. Work until you reach that level and work to keep it until it comes automatically. For your superconscious will, adjust to happiness as quickly as it adjusts to monotony. Believe it or not. Watch your monotony limit carefully. Don't let it crowd you out of living a happy life. Possibly, you will find, as I mentioned before, at the same hours of each day will be the black spots on your chart. If that is the case, analyze why they are there. Determine what causes these periods of general monotony at any particular time in every day. Now, there was a time that I felt loneliest, and truly lost. Everything that I was worrying about were most monotonous. Everything I was attempting to do were deadly wrong to me. It felt that I was living a life of pretensions and lies without being happy within my own little world. I tried everything possible to start anew, but could not do so because of the circumstances which were imposed upon me, due to false assumptions of my closest, who eventually abandoned me in religious fervor, which I am not aiming to disclose here, because enough has been said before. It was then I decided to carry a notebook everywhere. That is, everywhere I went, in my satchel after my work. I spent some time in coffee shops or walking the beach while I jotted down my pleasant memories of the day as well as my not so pleasant memories of the day on a different page. I continued with this exercise until I found that I could literally make my days more enjoyable, more fun, by doing fun things, creating new interests and hobbies at the end of the day. After a period of time, I discovered that I was only writing down my happier memories without having forgotten all the uglier memories of that time frame. This way, I was applying the happiness principle into my existence, which stopped me feeling bored and suffering monotony. My days were happier and I was healthier. Now I could concentrate on my work, on my tasks, and on my interests freely, without worry. It sounds very simple, does it not? It really is not as simple as it sounds, or easy, or even silly. Rooting out the cause will help you overcome the monotony of some particularly boring aspects of your work or your daily routine. Too often, you do not know consciously what things are apt to grind you down. Conscious recognition will make for conscious combat, and conscious combat for ultimate victory over monotony. Human nature is so constituted that the average person will find it difficult to enrich his life through psychological understanding of himself without spiritual growth to keep peace with the physical and mental development. In fact, over many years, as we have dealt with people and their everyday conduct, we came to the conclusion that no method of therapy can effect permanent changes in human behavior unless it is based on a realization of the spiritual nature of man and recognition of the human personality as an instrument of God for the expression of His divine nature and manifestation of His power and glory. However, this expression is by no means a religious one, but if it makes one feel comfortable, it may be of a positive nature. For a long time, it was thought that a human was divided into 3 parts, each distinct from the other: body, mind, and soul. The body was believed to be the traditional business of the medical man. The mind was the responsibility of the educators. The soul was, as you can guess, the preoccupation of the ecclesiastics. We know for practical and therapeutic purposes, the human personality must be considered a unity of function and purpose. The human must be studied as a total organism if man is to understand himself better, his relationships with others in general, and his relationship with God in particular. The trinity of man's nature makes it imperative for religion and science to abandon the negative, emotional thinking of the past. Mutual recognition must be made for the sake of the common welfare of humanity, of the simple truth that spirit manifests itself always in mental and bodily activities. Studies in abnormal psychology have attempted to shatter the traditions of religious philosophies. Not content with labeling as merely psychopathic hysterias all the phenomenon of religious conversion, the old psychology has ridiculed the visions of the great religious mystics as merely hallucinations in a self-hypnotic or traumatic state. It was said that humans are 99+% symbolic type of life. If one's interpretation of the symbols or their reactions is constructive, such conclusions should not be classified as abnormal. Many so-called miracles and even psychic phenomena are in the symbolic category of extra-normal and of what Professor J.B. Ryan of Duke University has once labeled as extrasensory perception. Be equally sure of this. Religion is not without its own prejudice, intolerance, and bigotry. Many ministers will not concede the value of the new psychology, preferring superstition to faith and attributing the phenomenon of extrasensory perception to supernatural causation. This preference continues despite the fact that Jesus himself said, "And greater works than these he shall do." Will Rogers, in his straightforward philosophic way, said what we should all perhaps subscribe to when he talked of religion. I have sometimes wondered if the preachers themselves have not something to do with this bigotry. You hear or read a sermon nowadays, and the biggest part of it is taken up by knocking or trying to prove the falseness of some other denomination. They say that the Catholics are damned, that the Jews' religion is all wrong, and that Christian Scientists are fake, or that the Protestants are all out of step. And I can add more to this list by saying the Muslims are all terrorists. Remember? That's what we seem to hear every day these days. Now, just suppose, for a change, they preach to you about the Lord and not about the other fellow's church or belief. For every man's religion is good. There is none of it bad. We all try to arrive at the same place according to our own conscience and teachings. It doesn't matter which road you take. Suppose you heard a preacher say, "I don't care if you join my church or the other fellows across the street. I don't claim mine is better." Hunt out and talk about the good that is in the other fellow's church, not the bad, and you will do away with all this religious hatred you hear so much of nowadays. This is the sort of religious philosophy one would expect from a man of Will Rogers' caliber, a man who had so many friends and no known enemies, because he never met a person he ever disliked. Every religion is good in its own way. It is good to the extent that he lives in accordance with the spirit of its goodness, faith, and love. This perhaps is the pertinent place to make a point to anyone who has up to this point felt repugnance for the various religious and biblical references which were made. Such a person is sensing by these reactions within his own nature the most common and perhaps deadliest negative form of emotional thinking: intolerance, prejudice, bigotry. The emotional thinking of a negative nature must be combated. Something must be done about it, and something can. For each one of us, and not you alone, individually can change an instinctive mental attitude that you may possess. You will find such a change perhaps the most self-satisfying experience you have ever had. A Dr. Carroll, which we have spoken before, writing in the Reader's Digest, once said, now wait for it, "If there is to be any regeneration of our people, it must take place in the small laboratories of our private lives." We must realize with all the intensity we can command that refashioning our own character is not only the most satisfying and rewarding preoccupation of man, but is also the most important contribution we can make to society. happiness then. Use the director's result of knowing yourself. It is a self-made commodity, a do-it-yourself acquisition. How many times have you seen a happy face and noticeably brightened yourself? Think what you are being happy with can do for others. Man was made to be happy. Man was meant to be happy. Don't let negative emotional thinking color your life with a gray coating. Utilize your waking hours to create happiness so that your superconscious will become accustomed to the happiness habit and take over your entire personality. Happiness means good health. It means longevity. It means success. Develop the happiness habit. Happiness is not happenstance. I don't know if you have heard that saying before, but it has been mentioned. All habits, good or bad, can be acquired. With the constructive thinking you have been doing up to this point, your habits, newly acquired, are all good. There is no room for the bad. Now, you must learn to make a habit or one of life's greatest gifts, happiness. The bad habit of monotony is the enemy of the good habit of happiness. We all must banish monotony, resulting unhappiness from your life, our lives. Prepare for yourself an unhappiness chart as described earlier and start to use it today, now. Within a few weeks, you will be nearer the goal of the happiness habit. But don't stop using your unhappiness chart yet. Keep on recording your monotony and unhappiness until you have achieved a true level of living. Make your life a life of maximum happiness constantly. And here comes the end of this time we have spent today. I will be meeting you again by the next episode. Until then, keep smiling and be truly happy. Thank you.
Oh